Ready to go to law school?
Oh my God.
That part's really loud in my headphones.
Are you still liking your choice there?
I do like it. I do. And I actually got a couple of feedback from people saying that they loved it. So,
Oh, nice. Well, here we are again, Joe. How does it feel to be an internet celebrity?
Oh, yeah. We are what? This is going to be episode 5. That's pretty cool,
Right.
dude. 5. We're on a
Yeah.
roll.
We are. We got a streak going.
We are. Neither of
So
us
what's
kind of
today's
we were ready to axe it today, but we're like, nope, we got to jump on here. We got to get the ball rolling. We cannot leave our listeners behind. We are here for you. Don't you all feel special?
Yes, and to show that, we are taking on a topic that I was reluctant to do. I was
Yes.
like, not the most exciting thing to talk about on a nice evening like tonight.
So let's get all of our disclaimers out and on the table. Greg and I are not lawyers, so please do not take this at face value. And if you feel that you need more information, definitely consult an actual lawyer, probably one that's from the actual European Union, because me and Greg aren't. So please make sure that you know that we are not lawyers. This is not official legal advice. This is purely our opinions of what we've read about GDPR over the last week or so.
And as you know, everything you read on the internet is 100% accurate.
Not true, everyone. Legal advice. Yes. Disclaimer.
Yes.
Oh, I was gonna totally download a disclaimer, whoop, disclaimer, like legal alert thing. I totally forgot I was gonna do that for this episode. Oh well, there we go. I just had it. Whoop, legal alert. Right? We're not lawyers.
Homemade one. Homemade one.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. So you failed to say what the actual topic is today.
Oh, well, yeah. So we're going to be talking about the lovely European Union and the new GDPR law that was recently passed, and kind of how it affects the common, small business Rapid Weaver user. Obviously this thing is huge. I did read through a summary there are 99 articles, and I read a summary. Someone wrote a plain English version of it. I read the whole thing. It was tough to get through, but I did read the whole thing, at least the plain English version, this guy's version of it, right? I didn't read the official version, but it is big. We only have 30 minutes tops on this podcast, so yeah, we're not going to be able to cover the ins and outs of everything, but I think we can kind of give everyone a basic gist of kind of the overview and how it affects them, and how it doesn't affect them, which is probably going to be most of this, right? I think a lot of this is common sense.
Yeah, I feel like I started to go through this, and first off, it's a massive undertaking, and almost kudos for pulling something like this off and getting it passed through and negotiating something this large. It's kind of like props in itself in this day and age, right? But just reading through some of these things, and I understand why people are so afraid and Rapid Weaver users are getting so intimidated by it. It's just because it seems to be targeted at companies that do data mining for a living. Those companies that aggregate and sell users and their personal information for profit. And I got to the point going through some of these websites and some of these tutorials and comments on it, and just hit me that this isn't as scary. People building Rapid Weaver sites aren't in these businesses, and I think being compliant in a Rapid Weaver site, it boils down to some pretty basic changes that almost everybody can do. I don't think it's as scary, and it's going to be as challenging as a lot of people kind of make it out to be.
Sure. I mean, reading through it, it definitely has a complete thing of politicians thinking they understand technology and trying to write laws for them. a little off topic, but I read this thing on GitHub as on their blog right now. They just posted it about a week ago. How the EU is trying to pass another law that requires platforms to filter uploaded content. That includes like for GitHub's perspective, it would be GitHub's responsibility to make sure that any code that was uploaded was not copyrighted and, doesn't violate somebody else's, trademark or copyright or any other thing. That's just ridiculous, right? Now that obviously that's more ridiculous than I think this GDPR thing is. But on the flip side, I've talked to a lot of RapidWeaver customers about this, primarily ones from the UK and Germany and whatnot. So members of the EU, at least currently Brexit, and a lot of this, a lot of them are taking it kind of like how the cookie law came out a few years ago, and how something like this, and this really is true, is completely impossible to manage from an EU perspective, right? I mean, there's millions of websites. There's no way that they could police this. It really is impossible. So it's mostly just, I think this is just a guideline of common practices that they feel that every business and website should have for their end users. But as of right now, it really is impossible, especially for people outside of the EU, for the EU governing bodies to regulate. It's just really impossible. Not to say that you shouldn't try to follow it, but I think the threats and the scare tactics that people are falling for are just completely insane.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And what I'll end up sharing in the show notes is probably I'll probably share one or two articles that kind of like put the tipping point for me for just having the realization that, I don't even feel like I fall in far violation of what they're looking to for us to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll make the changes because I want to be welcoming to our EU friends. So I'll make a few changes to my website, in particular my contact forms, just so I show that in good faith that I'm doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we should probably go into some of those details, huh?
Sure.
Are you gonna make
How you
changes to
want
your
to tackle
website for
this?
this?
Huh?
Are you gonna make changes to your website, you think?
Yeah, I'll definitely make some. Some of the simple ones like the contact form, you could just, add a couple more fields to, regulate that. I'll definitely take a lot of this into perspective. I'm not 100% sure how far to go with it yet. Because I integrate with things like PayPal, so I am I responsible for what PayPal does and what data PayPal has, you
Yeah,
know?
see, at that point, I'm kind of like, okay, here you have to contact PayPal for that stuff, but stuff that I can manage because it's like I run analytics, like Google Analytics, or you run
Yeah.
PWIC Analytics,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And um, I'm not going to be responsible for their stuff. They have their own tools to do this. They've been working on
Yep.
supporting this.
Yeah.
So,
Well, technically, like analytics doesn't log any personal data that could be. I guess we're kind of jumping into it, right? But um, any data that can be directly referenced to an exact individual.
right. But my point being is that these companies, these services, their responsibility, my company, my services, my
Yeah,
responsibility,
definitely. Yeah, 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 yeah.
you know.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But, you talked a little bit about contact form changes, and that's probably the first thing that I'm going to do. And I, it seems to be as simple as a checkbox, right? That's all you need
Hmm.
to that's required for the user to check to authorize consent to collect their information to follow up with them.
Yes. Well, one thing is it necessarily so if you're not actually collecting and storing that data that's in the contact form, right? Is that actually required? Like, so if that contact form never actually gets submitted to into a database, let's say, then does that do you actually need that sort of consent? Because if it's like just like a customer support thing where someone's emailing me, I'm not storing their information. It's just a way for me to reply back to them.
Well, I mean, you kind of are storing it, right? It goes into a server. It's in your inbox somewhere, right? I mean, me, I am a little different because I am actually storing that into a ticketing system,
Yeah.
and that ticketing system is something that I own and operate. So,
Mm,
in good faith, I'm going to definitely do that. I'm going to add a little checkbox to my forms that say, I consent to having, my name and email address, just so that when I'm following up.
mhm,
For the Rapid Weaver general who don't have that kind of a database back in their website, um, to be honest, I would err on the safe side because if you're sending it off, if you think of your inbox as a database,
mhm.
can they classify your inbox as a database at that point?
Yeah, but that point
It's
isn't it, you have to have a consent box for anyone to send an email to anybody?
uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I
There's
understand
different
where you're
like
going at. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
sure,
Um,
no, sure,
yeah. So
fair.
just so this one website that I brought up is I'm going to put it in the show notes. It is the GDPR in plain English. He kind of broke it down into various sections, and the first section I thought was really good. It's like basically the first section of GDPR is who does this apply to, right? So obviously this applies to EU citizens, okay, but it
Right.
also applies to um, now, the big question even I had is, well, I'm not a member of the EU, so why do I have to follow this, right? Well, the basic premise behind it is if you're doing business with EU customers, it's nice to do it on their behalf, right? Um,
Mhm.
it's that it is basically impossible for them to come after me personally, because I am not in the EU. But it's basically like, hey, I need to provide this as a something that's nice to have for my EU citizens that are customers, right? Um,
Mhm.
is that kind of how you agree with that?
Yeah, that's definitely like just, being progressive and forward thinking about it and definitely want to be welcoming and
Yeah.
humble to those, our
Hmm.
customers in the EU. I don't want to turn them off because I don't want to support their language or their,
Hmm.
their culture, their in this case laws.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
And kind of what data does this apply to? I think we kind of cover this. It's obviously databases, but it's like any sort of data file or database that contains any sort of identifying way to identify a specific individual. So that is definitely a name and an email address or an actual physical address or things of that
Right.
nature. So any way that you can identify a particular person, that is the type of data that this is targeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So I was thinking about this, and you could definitely do this checkbox approach, required checkbox approach on the built-in Rapid Weaver forms, contact form. I was thinking about, I got worried for a second, making sure Forms Plus supports this. I'm like, yeah, you could do this in Forms Plus, and
Mhm.
then if you had another a contact form that saved to a database like Forms Plus does and stuff, um, it gets a little tricky, and that's when if somebody asks you, hey, purge all the information about me. If you're using Forms Plus or you're using another contact form that saves to a database, that's when you're going to be required to go into the database, find all submissions from that user, and go in and delete them.
Yes.
Uh,
Now it
And
doesn't require that you have an automated way to do that. It just says that you have to
exactly,
be able to
exactly,
do that, right? So,
exactly,
um, again, with foundation form, same thing. You could just add a checkbox to your form. You can mark it so that checkbox is required. And if the user
exactly,
doesn't check that box, the form won't submit, right?
exactly.
So,
Can can, can foundations form save to a database?
yes.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I'm not. I wasn't aware,
Yep. Yeah, I can save to a
but
database. It doesn't do all the
cool.
auto database management like Forms Plus does, but if you just create the forms and then you just map all the fields in the database map directly to individual, form items. So every
Mhm.
name of the column matches the name of in the field in the form, and you're good to go.
Cool, cool. Not to get sidetracked.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so
Um,
how do we implement GDPR? I think we talked about it a little bit. Um, I'm just kind of going through what this article has, and
yeah, so the the link that I want to share in the show notes is actually a blog post from a WordPress contact form plugin.
Mm,
And I thought it was a great resource for this because they outline the things that you need to make changes for. And, going back, we talked about the checkbox, the required checkbox, and then we talked about the database stuff.
mhm.
Attitude that on that is definitely do it manually.
Yep.
Most web hosts, including Chili Dog, have a tool called PHP MyAdmin,
Mhm.
which gives you a web-based UI to run uh, MySQL queries on. And, in the last episode, we talked about Mac apps. We talked about SQL Pro, another great tool to search and use your database remotely. Um, so in this Ninja Forms, you know, they go on to talk about that. They talk about how to search and manage your database like that. And they talk about one other thing that's very important is a privacy policy, and having a good privacy policy will help kind of solidify that. So I actually have another link. The privacy policy company that I use, they have a free version and they have another paid version that's $27 a year per site. But the nice thing is that you can just click on the services that you use. Like I have a contact form on my site. It collects your name, it collects your address, it collects your telephone number, whatever, and it'll build a nice looking contact privacy policy for that. And you could just embed that right into your site. And so I'll share that with users. It's called,
Cool.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's called I Embedda. I Embedda.
Okay.
Embedda. I'll share it. It's pretty cool. Um, so just going through this. It's just one. It seems like an overwhelming amount of stuff, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be that terrible.
Yeah. Obviously, I think other parts of the bill actually require that, if you are collecting data, it's, encrypted. So that means HTTPS, right? So effectively,
Sure,
this is recommending that all
sure.
websites are running on HTTPS, which you should be doing anyway, users, right? It's super easy to do. Either, go host with Greg or check out Cloudflare, hook that up to your host, makes it really simple to get HTTPS up and running. If you are on a host that is going to try to charge you for that, you need to bail ship because HTTPS should be free everywhere. Okay. So do not, I hope you are not paying for any sort of SSL certificates because I know some hosts are still doing that and they're probably trying to charge you an arm and a leg. Right. Um,
Yes, yes, they do.
Yep.
Yes, they
If
do.
you are storing data in a database, make sure that that data at rest is encrypted. I believe that's part of the GDPR as well. If you're using
Well,
MySQL, that is a feature of MySQL as well.
well, one thing on that, Joe, is that data at rest is really around the HIPAA compliance.
Yes.
So if you're not storing HIPAA compliance or you're not storing credit card information or stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, then you're probably okay.
Oh, okay.
So you don't really have to worry about you're not storing like health information. You're not storing if you're doing credit card stuff. I hope you're using a payment processor that's PCI compliant, like Stripe and PayPal, and hope
Yep.
not we have users on storing credit cards like that. On a shared host, you're doing that kind of stuff would be very, very. I would strongly discourage it on a
Sure.
shared hosting environment, storing this kind of stuff.
Another part with collecting data is I believe you have to actually track where you received that data from. So you have to know, you have to be able to prove, um, where you got that consent, where the user actually subscribed to your list or where they, sent that is. A lot of if you only have a single contact form on your website, that's probably going to be really easy. But there are ways to do that. Like for example, I have my post office stack that integrates with Greg's email service, and I'm going to be shipping out an update that will actually send and submit along with the correct with the request the exact location and URL from where that was submitted, right? So definitely possible. Um, yeah. So just know you have to be able to prove where that submission came from. Again, it's going to be really easy if you only have one contact form on your page or something like that. You can prove that pretty darn easily. But if you are worried about that, then that's a solution.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. We just talked about that the other day, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's not just the location. I should mention it's also the user's location, not just the web location of where the contact form was. So if you're putting in a contact form, you need the visitor's IP address,
Yes.
most likely, so that they can verify that. And since you started talking about newsletters, you should definitely reach out to most most providers are probably already ahead of the game on this. Mail If you use Mailchimp or Mad Mimi, or
Mm-hmm.
if you use Chili Dog,
Yep.
it's all supported already. If you're unsure, definitely reach out, because you have about a month and a half or so before this law goes into effect, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. What else do you think about? What else do you think about this law? You think it's gonna have teeth?
I think, it's just because, the deadline is coming up and people
Yeah.
are stressing out about it, that but in the long run, it'll just kind of like be like the cookie law where people are just it's just going to be there, right? We'll have form options for us to add to our forms, and people will just forget about it, just like the cookie law. Yeah, people put the little banners up on their website. It just becomes a new thing, right? Where now we just have an extra text checkbox on our forms, so to
Yeah.
consent, right? So,
So we got ad block, we got cookie law block, and now we're gonna have all these notices to block when you load your pages. Right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
So I guess my summary is, have a good privacy policy. Add a consent checkbox that's required on your contact forms. If you're saving things to a database, make sure you know how to go into that database manually. If it I don't imagine this is something that's going to happen often, so automating something that's not going to happen very often doesn't really make sense.
Hmm.
Do it when it becomes a problem. It's my philosophy. So make sure you can go into the database and search for all users that might request it, and make sure you know how to delete them, and get back to your running your business, and making websites.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely. Not really much else to say. I think we covered everything. I don't think we've really left much out. There's a bunch of other boring parts of the law that really don't pertain to us, like um, what the governing bodies need to do to make sure that all this happens, and each country in the EU has its own representative for it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's all boring stuff. Um, yeah, GDPR, it's kind of common sense, mostly stuff that a lot of us were doing anyway, or we were going to be doing anyway, right? HTTPS, making sure that we're not giving out our customer data to everybody, um, like some worldwide apps are doing right now.
Hmm. Yes, they are.
Yes.
All right, very
Okay,
good. So
cool.
hopefully rapid reviewers are a little less scared, and a little more comfortable with what they're doing.
Yep. Cool. Well, I don't want to bore anyone else again with this podcast. So we are done with GDPR. Our next podcast is going to be exciting. It's going to be about images, and we got other ones coming up. So if you have any questions about this podcast or any others, send us an email at feedback at WeaverRadio.com. That is feedback at WeaverRadio.com again. You can also post questions on our space over at Weaver Space. And yeah, thanks, Greg. To get a hold of
Thank you.
us, I am at Joe Workman on Twitter. I'm on Weaver Space. And Greg, you are?
I am on Twitter at Chili Dog Host. I am on Weaver Space, and of course the forums at Barshard, my last name. So hit me up, ask me questions, send us that email, and look forward to hearing from everybody.
Cool.
Thank you.
5-star reviews on iTunes, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye.
Later.